Hey guys, it's me Kevin and welcome to another round of AFL Tipping. Today I'll be predicting the winners for all the games for round 7. Now unlike round 6, there will be some teams playing at home, namely Fremantle and their rival West Coast, as well as Sydney and GWS. They'll all be playing at home. So we do have some teams returning back to home. Oh, and Adelaide, they return to Adelaide on the Monday night. But like last week, just for the second time in VFL AFL history, no games will be played in Victoria, and I think that will be the case for the rest of the season. So without further ado, let's get started. So on Thursday night, the first game at the Optus Stadium Hub, and the first since round 1, Geelong versus Collingwood. Tough one to start the night. I do think Geelong will win, just because they seem to be a bit more convincing in the way they play, and given that they have beaten more quality opposition. And I'm talking about Brisbane last week. The way they beat Brisbane, it was a pretty comprehensive victory. And the way they came back also after trailing by about 20 points at quarter time. I think Geelong have got a lot of quality. Unlike Collingwood, who have got Sidebottom and Degoe still out. Now, yes, Collingwood did look good against Hawthorn. And they didn't seem to be faced with the absence of those two players when they played Hawthorn last week. But remember, Hawthorn weren't playing all that great last week. They were playing pretty dire football. So look, those two teams, they come to Perth. I think this is going to be an extremely close match. I think you can tell with the margin, just the 1 point. But what gets Geelong over the line is the fact that they've got more quality and more depth in their team compared to Collingwood, who have got Sidebottom and Degoe out. That was the determining factor, to be honest, and the fact that Collingwood beat a dire Hawthorn while Geelong beat an otherwise quality Brisbane side last week. So, obviously, quality of opposition and depth was the deciding factor in Geelong's victory. Friday night at Metricon Stadium, Essendon versus the Western Bulldogs. Another really tight game, which I was kind of deciding who should I tip. I'm tipping the Bulldogs for one reason, and that's because they haven't actually lost to Essendon since 2014. And Luke Beveridge wasn't even around back then. So Luke Beveridge has got a perfect record against the Bombers. Does that change this week? Potentially, and recent form suggests that, yes, it would change and Essendon would get their first win over the Dogs in quite some time. But what I thought about it, okay, both teams have got their injuries, but I think Essendon more so. And they've just lost Dylan Shield to a presumably 2-week suspension. They've also got Stringer out, Mug, Heppel as well. You compare that to the Dogs, they've got Dunkley, but they get Hunter back, or they got Hunter back last week. I don't know how he went against Carlton. I didn't really look into that game that much. I do think the Bulldogs will bounce back from their horror loss to Carlton last week. And the other thing is, you've got to consider that the Bulldogs, given that they weren't at their best last week, they obviously weren't playing with as much energy. You compare that to Essendon, who had to put a lot more effort in. I feel like the Bulldogs will recover better compared to Essendon, even though the Essendon got the extra day break. And we also look at last time when they had a massive loss on a Sunday night. That was back in round 2. They would go on to win the next Friday. So, look, it's going to be a very tight game. Essendon in very good form. The Dogs, they have also been pretty good this year, apart from a few times where they've had a few slip-ups. I just feel the Dogs, just because they tend to like to beat Essendon, it's a team they like to beat. I feel like they'll beat the Bombers just. Saturday afternoon, GWS v Brisbane at Spotless Stadium. Yeah, I'm not sure about that game. And yet another 1-goal margin. Look, I'm tipping the Giants only because it's at home. Literally, that's it. Brisbane, they haven't actually won this year outside of Brisbane. They lost to both Hawthorn and Geelong. They stay another week in Sydney and have to play the... they just fly to Sydney, don't they? on the day. Yeah, no, they fly to Sydney on the... Actually, I don't even know what's going on with Brisbane, to be honest. But if they fly to Sydney on the day, then that's going to especially hurt for the Lions. Look, North did beat the Giants in that same scenario, but I just feel the Giants, they were going to bounce back against Port Adelaide after losing to them. I just have a feeling that GWS, just because it's at home, they'll beat Brisbane, who seem to be unconvincing outside of the Gabba. Saturday night at the SCG, Sydney and Gold Coast. I'm tipping Sydney. Alright, you might be thinking, yes, they were terrible. Alright, they were terrible last week. Yes, they have just lost Isaac Heaney and Josh Kennedy to injury. Yes, they don't have a functioning forward line. Alright, Tom Papley's their only regular forward in there, and that's about it. But name me another team who had a dysfunctional forward line. If you guessed Melbourne, you're correct. Alright? And they improved last week and they were playing Gold Coast. Alright? I'm not convinced about Melbourne. I feel like they just had a good game against Gold Coast. It's a familiar story. It's all too familiar for Gold Coast. They have a shocker in round one. Then the next few weeks, they play spirited football and start playing well, start winning some games, and everyone gets all hyped up that Gold Coast might finally be improving. And then the phase where they give it an effort for 4 quarters and then just lose at the end. We're at that stage for Gold Coast, and I feel like their defence is so leaky at the moment. Teams like Sydney and Melbourne will be able to breach their defence and kick a winning score. Look, I'm not concerned about Gold Coast forward line at the moment. Rankin's doing well, so is King. They've got enough talent up forward and in the midfield, but their defence is probably the worst defence in the competition at the moment. And I think Sydney might be able to breach that and just get over the line against a Gold Coast team that they couldn't beat Melbourne last week. That concerns me. If they beat Melbourne, then I would have been tipping Gold Coast in a massive margin. But they lost to Melbourne. I just feel this is a too familiar story. And if they do lose to Sydney, I think the AFL will reinstate their policy about the free win policy. So yeah, Sydney to rip Gold Coast hearts in the last few seconds of the match. Also on Saturday night is Richmond and North Melbourne at Metricon Stadium. Alright, another dysfunctional forward line in North Melbourne. They can't seem to get a target inside 50. Like, they kick it in, and then their opposition mark it and then get it out of North's forward line. I mean, in that case, it was Essendon. You see how many marks Ridley took, or the other defenders. I mean, they just can't seem to get a target inside their forward 50. Okay, look, they're probably going to defend well. They are a tough team, North, and there's probably going to be another 75,000 people in Richmond's forward 50. And I expect at quarter time, the match gets cancelled by the police because the Queensland government is unhappy with the lack of social distancing in their forward 50. But if that's not the case, then I think Richmond, given that they've got a lot more class, both in the midfield and in the forward line, as well as the defence, I feel Richmond will get a win against the Roos. Will be fighting hard, but I just feel are faltering too much. Sunday afternoon at Metricon Stadium, Port Adelaide and Carlton. One I thought was going to be a very one-sided tip, but Carlton did play well last week against an otherwise informed Bulldogs side. But that said, they're coming up a Port side who are in very good form, top of the ladder with 160%, and they beat Premiership contenders GWS. So I feel Port Adelaide will finish hub life with yet another win against Carlton, given that they're in massive form. And remember, Carlton seemed to win Like, they have a good week, and then they have a bad week, and then they have a good week, and then they have a bad week. Carlton seem to be that sort of side at the moment. They've had their good week, so I think they're going to have their bad week against Port Adelaide, and then I think they're going to have a good week against North the week after. So that's the way I can see it. I think Port, they've just got too much class in their side, and they'll beat Carlton. Sunday afternoon at Spotless Stadium, Hawthorn in Melbourne. Look, I'm not going to talk about Melbourne too much. They beat Gold Coast. Yeah, nothing special, all right. Hawthorn, all right, it's rare that they lose convincingly 3 weeks in a row. In fact, it's rare they lose convincingly 2 weeks in a row. All right, they've had poor losses to GWS and Collingwood. I feel like Clarko will come up with something like he usually does. And I think they'll bounce back against Melbourne. Don't get me wrong, Melbourne are going to give it all. And the last time the two teams played, Melbourne won. And that was despite a very poor 2019 campaign. But I just think that Hawthorn, they've got Clarko coaching, all right? So I just feel Hawthorn, it'd be a long shot to say that they're going to lose convincingly for a third straight win. Could go either way. Melbourne might have some confidence in there, but I just feel Clarko will find a way to grind out a win. And lastly, on Sunday afternoon at Optus Stadium, the Derby, Fremantle versus West Coast. Fremantle can win for a third straight week. Don't get me wrong. Why? Because there are 30,000 Fremantle fans at the game compared to, guess how many Eagles fans? Alright, guess. I'll give you until the end of the tip. But that said, despite the fact that the crowd will be dominated by Fremantle fans, I think the West Coast Eagles will win just because they like Optus better than Fremantle and they love beating Fremantle. Freo haven't beaten them since 2015. West Coast have won 9 straight derbies and I think will break the record for a 10th straight derby. And the Eagles, they seem to be flat track bullies this year. And last year as well. So, another team that the Eagles will see, we can beat them very easily in Fremantle. I think the Eagles will account for the Dockers in a hard-fought derby, but I just feel that the Eagles' midfield will be too much for the Dockers, for the young Dockers to handle. And if you guessed 0 Eagles fans, then you are correct. Well, unless you count medical staff and assistant coaches, and the 4 interchange players on the bench. But apart from that, it's all Freo. But nonetheless, I think the Eagles will win too much quality in their midfield. So, to recap the tips, I am tipping Geelong, Western Bulldogs, GWS, Sydney, Richmond. Oh, wait, hang on a minute. I forgot, there's Monday Night Football. All right, my bad. Last game of the round, Adelaide v St Kilda at Adelaide Oval. Welcome back to Adelaide. I don't know if I'm going to regret this, but I'm going to be tipping Adelaide. I think it's one of those other games. I said it about the Bulldogs, I said it about the Eagles, where I talk about past form. St Kilda have had a poor track record at Adelaide Oval. I don't think they've ever won there. That's why I'll be tipping Adelaide. They need a win. They just need a win sometime. I mean, no team has gone winless since 1945. No team's gone winless since 1945, I don't think. So, I just can't see. Adelaide just need a win. And I feel like against the St Kilda side that's never won at Adelaide Oval before, as impressive as St Kilda can be, they also show that they choke a lot, as shown against Fremantle. And I think this will be another game where they just choke because they get overconfident. It's just Adelaide. And then Adelaide, well, they win. Look, everyone's saying they can't see when Adelaide's next win is, and quite frankly, I'm struggling as well. They're in absolute depleted state right now, but they have to win sometime. Even Carlton in 2018, as bad as they were, they found a way to win. Adelaide just need a win, even one win. They'll get it somewhere, all right? And I think, given St Kilda performed so badly in Adelaide Oval, I feel like this will be the one of only 2 chances Adelaide have at winning this year. The other one is against Melbourne. But it's one of their only two chances of winning this year. They don't win this, I can't see them winning for the season. So anyway, let's recap my tips. For the second time, I will be tipping Geelong, Western Bulldogs, GWS, Sydney, Richmond, Port Adelaide, and then I'll also be tipping Hawthorn and West Coast. Anyway, thank you for... Oh, yeah, and Adelaide. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Please comment who you think will win down below and what you think of my tips. Please check out some of my other videos and I'll also be uploading a video on where the grand final should be held. Anyway, I will see you then. Goodbye.